viewers around the world, viewers in Massachusetts, and viewers all over the social media. My name is Ronald and I'm presenting the show called Integration. Integration is a show that has been bringing to you through the partnership between Immigrants Development Alternatives, IDA, and Multicultural Television Network, which is MCTV. We're bringing this show to you to provide information. Information from people who pass through the system and who are working in the system and who provide, services, especially for immigrants. So things you need to know in order to better integrate into the U.S. community. So today we have with us Carlha Toussaint. Welcome, Carlha.
Thank you for having me.
And we are glad you accepting, our invitation to be here. So before we even go to talk about, as a community activist, talk a little bit about yourself, Carlha.
So hard to do. So a little bit about myself. My name is Carlha Toussaint. I am a Brockton resident. I came here when I was around 3 or 4 with my parents. We migrated here, so it was from Port-au-Prince, Haiti to Brockton, Massachusetts straight. And I've been working as an organizer / coordinator for the past almost 10 years. Okay. I've been working on different political campaigns as well as social campaigns. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if your audience have heard of the Fight for 15, mm-hmm.
which
is raising the minimum wage. Mm-hmm. Earn sick time, which is getting benefits for people who are sick to take some time off to, take care of themselves. You don't want people coughing on your fries or your coffee. As well as I've worked on the Fair Share Amendment, where we looked at where we can bring extra revenue to our school systems as well as our infrastructure. And just an array of social campaigns in order to kind of look at the working class conditions and what we need to help ourselves elevate. I went to school with a degree in crime law and justice, but my main focus was always in the justice part. Haitians, I would always say, we have like one of the grandest history of, fighting for rights, revolution, and, protecting, I would say what God has allowed us as, inalienable rights that we all have, natural rights, to freedom, the thought and the wills. And so ever since a little kid, I've always been interested in that. So as I integrated, I learned so much about the civil rights movement, which I thought mirrored, the Haitian struggles and the Haitian movements in Haiti as well. I've always been fascinated. So I've been volunteering since I was 12 years old. My first volunteer job was at the St. Joseph Manor. Mm-hmm. I'm a person of faith. I'm deeply spiritual. So I started volunteering at 12, working with nuns and understanding, what are some of their process. I went to Brockton High, where I graduated in high school and started my school career in Eastern Nazarene College. So that's a very disciplined school. It's a dry campus. I think it was in 2011 where everyone was allowed to go to the movie theater. So it was a very strict school, and I learned a lot of discipline. And then from there, I guess some of my work experiences as well as my, personal life growing up, I saw so much injustice. And I remember one day I was mopping the floor. I won't say the company's name, but they passed me over for a position. I know I had like 5 recommendations from shift leaders and the general manager who's going to a different store. And I know, I remember that day so vividly. When they were like, oh no, you can, at least let me see what you can do. And I always felt like that was fair from the new management. I was tricked and I was asked to actually train someone who didn't know how to be a basic crew member in order for her to tell me what to do at the end. And I was like, oh wow, that's like my first taste of injustice in the working class. And I remember mopping the floor and I was praying to God, send me something please, Lord. And a community organizer came with Mass Uniting and was like, can you sign this petition? I was like, yeah, what else can I do? How else can I help? Literally, he was like, I want you to meet my director. I met with the director. And then the next day, I was a community organizer working on the Fight for 15. So I've been involved in movements I would say will be very historical in the next 20 years. The Fight for 15 was something small. It was part of the first ever strike in New York when we shut down the McDonald's in Times Square. And I've been part of some beautiful movements to help the working class.
Okay. So I could see and understand like why you're a community activist, the way. So through all of that experience you just mentioned you had, so what kind of things you really enjoy in doing in being a community activist?
I think I enjoy just educating people of their rights and having them understand, like, what are you voting for? How you can build a movement or policies that make or reflect your needs, especially like we're working so hard and we're in a capitalist system. You want to be able to alleviate some of the pressures and stress. So how can I do that? By education and going out there and, being myself and connecting with people and being very personable. Because sometimes people want to hear this. How can I better myself or get out of a stuck situation where I felt when I was mopping those floors? So I think just educating people is really my forte, and I got an enjoyment out of it.
Okay. And I would glad if you can also talk about, I know in terms of culture, because through the show what we're trying to do is educating people, and we're trying to inform people as well through the show. So as someone you said you immigrated from Haiti to here, so how has it been for you to assimilate into the U.S. culture? So, barriers, things that you found like challenging,
Well, I've always felt like it was hard, but manageable. I know when I was a little girl, it was hard, like, when you're home, your primary language, and my first language, but my first language is Creole. So going through the school system and, having like, only at home you're speaking Creole, and that's where you're naturally, able to speak, and then going to school and kind of like having those challenges in reading and writing. I think that's where the challenges came more. And, seeing my parents not being able to communicate with teachers on, like, helping me out, and teachers not being able to really be equipped to help me, I felt like I had to navigate and kind of, like, teach myself. I used to skip school a lot to learn. I would, back in the day, the History Channel, the Travel Channel had so much great content where I would just watch, read, learn the vowels, the consonants, and just like let it roll through my tongue. I think it started to pick up after, where that's when I got introduced to civil rights and started to learn. So, when I used to skip school, by the time I got to school, the things they were teaching, I was able to learn already because of what I was doing. And it gave me an opportunity where I felt like I was at one point advanced. So let's say when I went to middle school, I went to South Junior High. I was in, the preparatory classes, and it was not until a few professors were just noticing, like, "Oh, wow, you're doing really well." And then within a month, when I left from remedial classes, I ended up in advanced because they were like, you have a lot of knowledge, but the communication's not there. So I went through the school, just having some issues. Reading and writing, but I've always been in advanced and honors. Sometimes I would dip to college prep courses, but that navigation and importance of someone scoping, my ESL issues wasn't until I got into college, where I had a Nigerian professor like, "You write like you have ESL issues." I was like, I've always felt that, but didn't know how to advocate for myself. And I always felt like, if I had people, more mentorships, more understanding, but I would say that assimilation was easy because being Haitian, we learned so many languages, and we have this strong, will of education, and we have a strong will for justice. So I was like, this is always going to be my given right. I'm getting an education, which is always the best thing. But even if I face those challenges, I know I have to get over them, because it's not going to be a permanent state, So I think it was a challenge at first, but it was a manageable challenge if you have it in your heart to continue the process.
Okay. And in terms of, me, I'm original from Haiti, and you are as well, but you said you come here when you were like 3, something like that?
Very young.
So culturally, because now you look at yourself as a community activist, I know, like in Haitian culture, sometimes we don't like to engage that much. So, how would you share with the audience that are listening, like how did you? I mean, you have overcome that in order to, you know, let's say there is an event in the community. Sometimes when you're trying to reach out to our community, when I say our community, Asian who lives there, sometimes it's hard to have a good turnout, or for them to be, let's say, volunteer, because sometimes what happens is that sometimes we're looking at, okay, I'm volunteering, what am I going to get out of it?
Yeah.
So how could you,
I would always say you're going to get something out of it. You're going to be in the end, you're going to have the knowledge, and you're going to have the abilities to make the right decision moving forward. So you are getting something out of it. It may not be something tangible, but, knowledge is something. As a community activist, I realize, working for various of different groups, in the faith, the union, as well as community groups, it has always been a challenge to turn out the people. It's like, do you have food there? Is there going to be a bal? And so it's more of like, I think Haitians naturally, we are politically engaged, but we're just not at home. But once you're here for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, this is your home. You have 2 homes now. So the same activism you would take in, say if you were in Delma, where I come from, should be the same activism that takes place in Brockton. Growing up, I always said when I used to watch Law and Order SVU, I don't want to be the people outside the yellow tapes. I want to be in the yellow tapes. I want to know what's happening, and so I get the right information. It's not, my people, I feel like we always, when you tell Marie-Lou something, it's Marie-Lou's perception of what you're saying, rather than let me get the information and then now I can discern it for myself. And I think that's important, so things don't get lost in translation. We got to be inside the yellow tape, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So all the viewers, you are still listening to Integration, and the show Integration is a partnership between Immigrants Development Alternatives, which is IDA, and Multicultural Television Network, which is MCTV. So we are continuing with the dialogue we have with Carlha Toussaint. Carlha Toussaint is a young originally from Haiti, who's been involved in a lot of activities, and now she is a community activist in Massachusetts, especially in Brockton. So Carlha, as we continue with this conversation, so in many people from Haiti, when I heard like from some parents, they said, if you come like with your kids and your kids is small, like you come to this country, it's hard to, raise the kid in a way that the kid can come out as a model in the society. Like some people, they said when they bring their kids here, like if the kid is 3, sometimes they might take the kids and go back to Haiti to spend some time and come back here. And they look at more, if people come to resettle here, they have more chance if the kid is older. Like, for instance, someone come here, let's say 17, 18, it's more like older for them to grab what she's more good about in the society versus someone who come here, very young, like 3 years old. So how did you, navigate yourself in terms of, you said, okay, this is what I see it's good in the society. This is what I see. This is the model. This is the person I would like to be in terms of, let's say, model for other Haitians.
I definitely understand that. I want to thank my parents, because my parents raised me very Haitian. Like, every weekend we would watch some old Haitian documentaries. My dad's really big in that. I know he's known in the community as Big Joe. He's a DJ. Okay. But I would always watch the documentaries. And then I used to go back and forth when I was a little kid to Haiti to visit. But I come from a really bad part of Brockton, an area that's really drug infested, gang infested. And, there's a saying, it's not, your environment that cultivates you. And it does have a factor in cultivating you. There's been so many opportunities where I could have let the streets take me, I guess that's a term. But it was just home, like to make my parents proud. I had a really deep sense of where I come from and who I am. I'm, being an immigrant and having immigrant parents, I always felt a responsibility, like the sacrifice that you've done to come here, being away from family, friends. I just always had that sense like, oh wow, like that must be hard. How can I make it easier growing up for my parents? So yes, like Saturday mornings at 6 a.m. I was cleaning, I was scrubbing floors, I was making food, I was doing the 3 steps and making me, like I was doing all of that. So I felt like it mirrored what it was back home, but I had to give them a little twist as well. It's like, well, we're in America, we got to learn some systems, we got to learn about taxes, we got to learn about, credit scores and your credit. We got to learn how to actually assimilate, growing up. So it's like, I always gave my parents advice, it's like, you can still raise us Haitian, but also remember that we're in America, so your kids are going to be exposed to a lot of American things. So you have to be able to understand and have that knowledge. That's why it's always important. I always, when I'm connecting with Haitian people, older Haitian people, I'm like, don't think we're a lost group. I think my generation, we're so proud in the midst of finding how beautiful blackness is, and especially in Haiti, black is just so beautiful. So we are remembering, like, a lot of Haitian kids I come across, and I keep calling myself a kid, I'm a young adult, but but we, like, in the times where you're assimilating to some of the oppressive mindsets in America, we have to be honest with that, but to remember, like, wow, Haiti is the first black nation to gain some freedom, not some freedom, we annihilated slavery in our island. That brings such a chill to a lot of young Haitians. It's like, we want to know more about the culture and we want to go back as well. But there's that disconnect where it's like, there was a frustration I see amongst a lot of older Haitians where it's like, it's like, Mom, like, look at where we are right now. This is the opportunity. How do we work collectively with the strengths and the richness of your culture to bring it with the knowledge that we have, as young millennials? And I think it's possible. I think one of the things is reminding people of their history and the proudness of their culture, but not in a way where it's like, this culture is bad, you only can use that. I think everyone has goods and bads, and how do you create that synergy in developing that child? Okay,
definitely. And I have another question that comes from your answer, is that how do you navigate in terms of different culture here? When I say different culture, I'm talking more, we have, in Brockton, we have a lot of Cape Verdean there. We have a lot of, I don't know much about the Irish.
Yep, we have Irish, we have Polish, we have Africans. We're getting a lot of people.
How you, as, a Haitian,
you
navigate and you integrate into?
I think we all have the same stories. We're a land of immigrants, so everyone's sacrificing a piece of home just to come here. And that's a common denominator amongst us all, even if it's a different culture. It's like, hey, you left Cape Verde, you left an island. You left some tropical places to come to a really cold place. And, you're still trying to hold root to back home, like many people are. Some cultures are more successful than others. But there should be a proudness, of your culture that I've seen with other nationalities and ethnic groups. But at the same time, there's such a hope of the prosperities, like that remembrance of, oh, I left because there wasn't enough funding for schools, it's privatized, or we didn't have enough work. Remembering that, and then when I come across different cultures, it's like, oh, wow, you have the same story as my parents. You left here for a better life, That's a common denominator. There's a lot of more commonalities than differences, I would always say, because we're all leaving home, we're all leaving a piece of ourselves to be part of the stream, and we're making that fabric work in our everyday lives, So when you go to work, you see all these nationalities. When you go to a food shop, you see all these nationalities. I think it's beautiful. It creates a mosaic piece where it's like, I would always say, maybe if I was in Haiti, it might be a little boring, where it's only Haitian. But I know with being part of the fabric of, my Haitian DNA, I can connect with someone from Mexico, Cape Verde, someone from DR, and even people from Ireland as well. Like, oh, wow, like your parents came here during a famine, even if it was your great-great-grandparents who came from from a famine. You know, my parents escaped too because they wanted to make sure their children was okay. Whereas that's big in itself because that creates the fabric of your family history. I used to play a game like, tell me your family migration story. And when you hear, like, so when I was working on the Brockton United bill for Brockton, when I started off each meeting, tell me your family migration story, you would see and hear the commonalities of why everyone left. And I was like, look at this. We're more the same than you think we are. Like, the difference is, different culture, but why we're here is very, very similar.
Okay. In terms of engagement, like, from communities, so what I see in Haiti, like, people look at sometimes the voting, like when there's election, they look at the voting, the way things done in Haiti, and they probably, sometimes they vote, sometimes they don't vote. So how important it is, like, when someone immigrating here in America and they become American citizen, and how that is important for them to vote, especially if we look at the Asian community.
So in Haiti, you have that right to vote. Like, that's something like drinking water, you know? It's something you can easily do. I always say, like, history for me has always been dear. I was going to study history until my history teacher was like, you can either make documentaries or teach. Other than that, there's no real sustainability. But I always say, like, voting is something natural to us, right? If you learn the history of voting for people of color here, that's something people had to die for. So imagine, you know, you want to be able, say, if you came here in the 60s and the 70s and you wanted to vote, the amount of suppression that took place. Something that was like drinking water, and sometimes it's discouraging when you come here to see all of the suppressions that take place. But as Haitians, we should remind ourselves we're trailblazers, we're revolutionaries, and we have led so many things, so it can't just stop here. It has to continue, you know. I always say my parents' generation and, you know, older folks, you guys have the first taste of natural freedom. In America, we're free too, but there's been barriers people of color has to face. So I've always loved the civil rights movement, because if it wasn't for that, you know, the works of Martin Luther King and other great leaders, even the SNCC movement, we wouldn't be able to. We sometimes forget some of our duties as people, to remember, like, people weren't always able to freely vote. And something that we felt like, I'll do it sometimes. But you have such a right, and you have a place to make a decision for how your community looks. I know, you know, if you break it down, there's the national, there's the state, and there's the local. The local, building your local community is so important. Voting for people who represent you and represent your community needs are important. So why not take place? How would someone who is from, you know, let's say the Netherlands know what the needs of a Haitian woman is? You know? They'll try to have that conversation and understanding, but to really be in depth of the background and the struggles and everything, wouldn't it be nice to have someone who understands, like, has that empathy versus that sympathy? And so empathy and sympathy is like oh, I understand, and empathy is like I've been in your shoes and I can feel what you're going through. So if you say I need X, Y, and Z, Carlha, I can understand your thinking and the reasons why for your needs of X, Y, and Z. So voting creates that power you have to get represented and to get your community the needs it needs.
Okay. And so how would you advise, like, everybody, especially the Haitian community, when there is election, you know, what type of things they need to know to educate themselves and go? As you're a community activist, so I
would say a scoreboard. You have to ask yourself, what are you passionate about? Are you passionate about schools? Are you passionate about infrastructure? Are you passionate about crime? Are you passionate about the youth? You know, give yourself a scoreboard and look at who's running, you know. How do they check off on your passions? Educate yourself on some bills. Go to some of the city meetings. Make sure, like, there is representation. So if they're all in an English meeting, next time they'll be like, you need an interpreter, because I'm part of this community as well. So getting involved, going to, there's community groups that host different briefings, different activist meetings, and getting knowledgeable on what you're voting for and who you're voting for, I think is a huge key. You don't have to wait every 4 years. We have special elections. We have every 2 years. There's different times and ways you can vote. For example, I'll always remember this story. I remember when I was door knocking for earned sick time, and someone's like, "Oh, I don't vote." But I was like, "Hey, but do you have sick time?" "No." And I'm like, "So why don't you vote and go get yourself some sick time?" That's how easy it could be.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for anyone. We're waiting on you. And they're like, "Oh, I can vote for sick time?" I'm like, "Yeah." So your ballot is not just your candidates. There's so much issues on it as well. So you're not like, "Qu'il a changé ça." I'm like, you didn't read that. Like, you don't want to be reactive, you know. You want to be proactive, and I think that's the best way, is voting and being, involved in your community. To be proactive is important. And I understand everyone's like, listen, times are hard, We are working longer hours. But that same little time you would give, voting is kind of like a scratch ticket. You can go into a store, wait in a line, and like scratch some tickets. You can do that in voting, wait in the line at a poll, and vote. Also, just an hour to educate yourself. It doesn't take too much time. You're not spending 5, 20, 40 hours like myself engaged, but an hour, maybe each day or, every other day, to understand like what's the policies governing you, I think is so important. So it's that power of knowledge. You send us to school, like Haitians are so big in educating, but it's like you got to educate yourself too. You can't just have your kids educate and then tell yourself like, no, it doesn't stop with just us, because if I took that same mentality and like, well, Kasim, you go learn, I stay here and I don't need nothing and know nothing, I just try to put that as an analogy. I feel, for my sake, I don't think that makes sense, because my kid is going to need me to be aware of certain things, and I have to be that parent figure to help navigate his thoughts.
Okay. So all the viewers, you are listening to Integration. And Integration has been bringing, through the partnership between Immigrants Development Alternatives and Multicultural Television Network, to provide you with information. So we continue with the conversation with Carlha Toussaint. So Carlha, if we look at, we listen to all of the great things that you've been going through and things that you've learned, and, talking about the assimilation into the U.S. culture and stuff like that. So, based on your experience, what has been either, let's say, good experience, if I say it that way, and challenging experience when you're reaching out the community? And if you can give either example, like how you feel like when you're working with the Haitian community.
Mm-hmm. So working with the Haitian community, our country motto, like, "Union fait la force," right?
Yeah.
I live by that, because I'm like, wow, like, whenever I come across Haitian people, like if I'm, doing door knocking, which is an activity, you go around your community and you inform your neighbors, there's such a lively spirit to connect with people. We're so passionate about issues. We want the best. And it gives me hope, because it's like, I know, like, I'm going to meet a mom and pop, similar to my mom and pop, who wants the best, who wants to see better, a little complaining. But they want to see just as much as anyone else, for like our community to strive. Some of the challenges is like, like, oh, I can't make it, I don't have time. And sometimes, I'm not going to lie, I think we got to shake it up. The challenges is it doesn't have to be formatted in some of the same old ways. We have to bring our culture out. So maybe, like, if we are having these activist meetings, informal meetings, let's have a party, I think our people are celebratory. And I think it's like, if you're working a hard day, and that's some of the challenges, it's like, I don't want to have someone who's working over 12 hours come to be as if they're in a classroom, I think voting's fun. I think being involved in your community is fun. I'd like to eat some, des sauces poivre avec some grill while I'm learning about this bill, and some compa in the back, like, yes, we have to be more engaged, but who else is going to do that for us if we're not involved? we can't expect other people to do that. So that's the challenge, is like we would like all these, different changes in how the meetings are ran or how the information is disseminated towards us. But the only ones who can do that is ourselves. So if we're not active and we have this expectation, like passing the buck to someone else, we're not going to get exactly what we want unless we're the ones doing it.
Okay. And I assume now, like, is there anything like interesting in terms of, I don't know, like you involving?
Oh, there's so
the
many.
Yeah, can you share with some examples?
So there's there's 3 things I'm involved. So the first thing I would say is like being an immigrant. I think it's really important that we see ourselves protected, and I think a community that's safe is important. So I am definitely for, and I would advocate for people to learn more about the Safe Communities Act and how it, gives that leeway where, people feel comfortable at home because we have made this our home. After 20 years, it's like, this is your home. As much as I would say, hey, home is back in Haiti, I have to be honest with myself. Like, I have 2 homes, that's at my heart. Also, the census is important. We all have to be counted. And also young entrepreneurship, so like Brockton Networking Expo, BNE, consulting them and how to, develop young entrepreneurs and local talents and skills, I think is important. How do we give back to I guess we're the babies, the babies. You don't want a bunch of talented people leaving the community, specifically Brockton or Massachusetts, to go to New York, to LA, because they feel unsupported and they're thriving elsewhere. And you're like, well, that person's from Brockton. I'm like, how much could it have done for us if they stayed in Brockton? So those are just some of the 3 activities and issues I feel like are very passionate to me.
And as we're going to be about to finish with the show today, so as a community activist, what would you share with people who would like, they are immigrants and they would like to do what you're doing, they would like to be more active into what's going on in their community? So what can you share with them to stay motivated?
I would say if you're going to have any community meeting with your communities, if whatever ethnic group you're in, make it like it's back home. People would like a little sense of feeling a home sense. I think you can get the message out and then create that comfortability and that engagement. So I know the next time I have a community meeting, especially if I'm going to cater to the Haitian community, maybe I'll have some décollé avec sauce poivre there. Maybe I'll have some music. And I would ask people as well, like, you have to always survey your audience. What do you need or what do you want to allow you to feel comfortable and even interested to engage? We can't just set up these meetings anymore with a box of pizza and and then talking at people. We got to start really engaging and meeting people where they're at. I think that's very important.
Okay. So all the viewers, we have Carlha Toussaint today. It's just, we don't do the show and having only other people from offices who just at only the policy level or the management level, but we have other people who come through the system and to learn from the system. And look at right now, we have Carlha, and Carlha is a community activist, and she explained how she enjoys what she's doing, and give advice about other people who would like to be a community activist, what they should do and how they should approach things, especially culturally sensitive approach, which is good in terms of integration. So, Carlha, thank you for being at the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you're very welcome. And we hope to see you for next show. And all the viewers, as I say, my name is Ronald Bernard, and I'm glad to present the show called Integration. Have a good day, and we'll see you for the next show.